when you go on to bid patrol, looking at it from a command point of view, it's really necessary. The boats desperately need repairs, and the men need some rest, and the ships need protection. So a lot of functions are being performed simultaneously. But, one of my observations on it, that's when morale goes to hell. As long as they're out there fighting, as long as men aren't dying everywhere and getting really hurt elsewhere, that's when morale is good. When they get back to the pontoon and start thinking about the implications of what they've been doing, that's when the blues hit and morale goes to hell. And you start having drinking problems, etc. And people start doing what people do, getting in trouble. So that wasn't much fun for us, for the officers anyhow, trying to babysit these guys, who were basically doing what normal people do in a high-stress, death-defying situation. So then we went back on the line. We did a number of operations, but, most people who've been on the line for a period of time do have sort of a defining moment in that year. My defining moment happened relatively early on that first combat month. It was during November 9th and 10th. We were still out of Dongtam, and I don't know the name of the smaller rivers, but it wasn't all that far from where we were anchored out. But intelligence told us that a main force North Vietnamese unit had come into the area. By the time they get down there, they're never going to be more than about 350 guys out of a theoretical 1,000. But anyhow, there were supposed to be 300 and some odd regulars on top of all the guerrillas. But of course, as much as Tet was successful as a propaganda thing, the Viet Cong were decimated. I mean, the U.S. really killed a lot of them. They went out and did what they were supposed to do, and they attacked here and there, but they gave their lives in large numbers. So, they needed help. So we get this intelligence. So in classic way, we're in partnership with the 9th Infantry. And anyhow, so they get planted out in this area. And although we were often folks carrying them out, I know my boats weren't assigned to carry them out. They may have gone out with somebody else's boats or in helicopters. But either way, our mission, for which we used 50 boats, both RivDiv 91 and RivDiv 92, was fire support and whatever. They were going to attempt to pincer them, to crowd them in where several waterways came together and trap them. Easier said than done, but it was a well-conceived, it was a good idea. And the mission ended up going for basically 2 days as we went in the first time up a fair-sized river that could have been 50 yards wide or so. So it's not a creek, it's a real river, even at low tide. Going off the big rivers, we're going up that river, we're playing this role. And as we went up, a B-40 rocket was fired at one of the monitors. And it's the only time that it wasn't my monitor. I was not in the lead this time. But it's the only time I ever had a sailor killed who was directly under my command. He was a little southern boy, last name of Cross, like Billy Joe Cross. And he was in the well deck where the 81 millimeter mortar was. And his peers had ducked into the compartment while we were in that moment. And the rocket came in and just fell into this well deck. And he was killed instantly. And first shot, no defense against that. So of course, now you have a huge line of armored troop carriers returning fire into this ambush. And they're shooting at us more rockets, more machine guns being fired at us. So we're returning this tremendous amount of firepower. The early monitors had a 40 millimeter cannon, but the usual configuration with 50 on each side in the turrets, 20 back there. Terrible, awesome weapons. 40 millimeter crank, we call them coffee grinders that fit up over the 50s. Really terrible weapons, terrible, deadly weapons. Anyhow, so we really lighten the boats a little bit. And finally, our division commander says, ceasefire, ceasefire. And I have this, as fate would have it, it's the only time I ever did it. I had a little tape recorder. And when the shooting started, it's running on batteries, I pushed play. You can hear the ceasefire, ceasefire. And it stopped. And there was this bang. And a guy back there fired a captured, I assume, 57 recoilless rifle at me. We were up there on top, and he'd see my helmet. And he specifically fired, aiming at me. And it went just over my head. I heard, and you can't hear the whoosh, but you hear the muzzle blast, and then you hear the shell falling on the far bank. It just went whoosh, bang, whoosh, bang. And it doesn't get a lot close. He was aiming for me. And so then a lot of cursing and shooting again. So we went on, but there were 3 times in Vietnam when I probably should have been dead. That's probably one of them. He had one object in mind. Officers had been killed up in that spot before, at least one in 92, the year before, a guy named Wyrick. It's a sad story, but he was up there and a B-40 rocket went in between the coxswain's flat and the round turret. And there was about this much space, and the rocket just happened to glance in there, and whoop, it was a heavy firefight. And as soon as they could, somebody said to him, sir, can I help you? He'd obviously been hit. And he said, and probably his last words were, don't bother with me, I'm dead. And afterwards, when the smoke cleared, they pulled him out. He came out in 2 pieces. He'd been shot in 2. The B-40 rocket blast hit him directly. What you find is, you get in these situations, yes, we'd all like to kill the enemy, but the immediate thing, among other things, is for you to live through it and to suppress their fire. And so you hope you're killing them, but whatever you want them to stop. And he didn't fire again. We had a general firing. Then we turn around, and my group, I can't remember if it was both groups, my group goes down, turns around and goes back just a little bit and goes down a much narrower river, more like canal type, with a little wider than that. It's a real river, but it wasn't very broad. It wasn't real wide. So we start down there. Of course, we get ambushed again. So we return fire on both sides. And somewhere else, there was so much. And as fate would have it, not only did I have a tape recorder, but I had a little Super 8 movie thing, and I taped it on the flagstaff behind me. And when the first shot went off, I just hit it like that. And what a visual feast. You can just see the 50s are just cutting big trees down, and they're falling, and you can see the explosions and maybe some enemy muzzle flashes, and it's a little hard to differentiate as to which is what is. But there was a lot of shit flying, and in the process, things were going so much, I grabbed my helmet, and it went like that, pull it down a little, and whack, I got hit right there on the wrist. I can still find the scar if I look for it a little bit. But whack. Well, everybody has their sick thing. And one of mine was always, getting an artery cut in here. And I can remember the first thing I did was turn my hand over to see if it had gone through. And it hadn't. I put it out like this, and it hit you can see, or I used, a major blood vessel, maybe not my major artery, but a major blood vessel. And every time my heart would pound, I squirted blood about from here to that camera. Oh, geez, this is not my best dream, so I'm squirting blood over the coxswain's flat because I'm at the back of the coxswain's flat and spraying blood on people. So they were quick. They had stuff nearby, and they got a compress, slapped it on, ace bandaged around it, held it tight, and that was it. I never needed to be medevaced or whatever. We continue on, and somebody snapped a picture of me later that day or the next day, standing on the boat, smiling with I had come shod a burp gun, an old Korean War burp gun, the old 45 caliber submachine guns, the cheap stamped things. And, somehow it got in Vietnam a long time ago and probably captured from a dead VC. Anyhow, I ended up with it. And there were certain things where I liked to use it because it wouldn't ride up so much and I could take a real target on something with that 45 submachine gun. Sitting up between the mounts, I would often carry a couple of weapons up, just sort of resting on the mounts or nearby where I could grab them fast. So we go down this river and we end up running our boats up on the sides of this little river at nighttime. Well, the Nippopalm came right down to the bank. They could be standing 2 yards away from you beyond the bow, and you probably couldn't see them. So we were feeling very vulnerable that somebody would sneak up and throw some hand grenades or whatever. So we all stayed awake all night with our guns ready. And the artillery fired flares, the big flares that would last a minute, all night. So we were there. We were blocking, as was our role. So the next day, we're ordered back out. We were exhausted, and that was, for sheer fear, that was scary, because you were somewhat defenseless. At least it felt that way, being in the open like that. So we go out, and I am the lead boat in my Mike 2, and leading the whole band. And the command decided, because it was so dangerous and we had these problems, that they would walk artillery out ahead of us along the banks. So they were doing this quite successfully. And we came around a bend and had a nice straightaway. So we're going down the river, and I'm aware that they're walking artillery around out in front of us. And all of a sudden, about 100 yards away, a 105 shell drops right into more or less the middle of the river. And command is aware of that. I'm not command, so I'm just taking care of 6 tango boats or so. And so they're radioing, and it happens. We were in some kind of little radio blackout area, and they kept saying, ceasefire, turn it off. Well, it wasn't happening. They couldn't hear us. And they started walking these shells down, and finally one hit not very far from us. And it all happened very quickly, but spatially I could see that the next shell was actually going to hit our boat. And one time in my life where I knew I was dead. We were in this blackout. Nothing could be done. No time to turn the boat out of the way. And one time in my life, I just said, I'm dead. And they turned it off. the word finally got through, the last shell never fell. And if it had, I wouldn't be here talking with you today. Me and my crew would be dead, because there was no question spatially about where we were and where those shells were falling. We were right on 100% in the middle of the bullseye. And it was just one of those blind luck. God is interfering in our lives, tapping me on the shoulder kind of things. So, talk about feeling like a wet noodle. That was not a good thing. Well, only a couple minutes later, I'm still in the lead. We're still going out to that bigger river where I'd had the recoilless rifle guy before, and not very far away now. And I get a call from senior command saying there are a bunch of troops out on that bigger river on the far bank. And they're out in the open there. And there's a guy with the